Welcome to Season 3 of DTBY's Community Podcast, hosted by the CYC.
We are a movement dedicated to inspiring, mentoring, and building the leadership qualities of tomorrow's leaders.
This season, we are connecting youth to professionals, mentors, and community leaders who possess specialized knowledge and experience in areas relevant to youth resilience and safety. By leveraging the expertise of these individuals, we hope to empower youth with information and insights that are vital for their well-being and security.
Before we introduce this episode's guest, we would first like to offer a land acknowledgement.
Although this gathering is virtual, we recognize that DTBY convenes on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of many nations, including the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat peoples, also serving as home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
At the Dare to Be Youth charity, we are proud to promote the spirit of helping, sharing, and caring for our neighbors without the expectation that has been exemplified by each of these nations as the first peoples of this land for thousands of years. And we wish to acknowledge our gratitude for the ongoing opportunity to live, work, and build community on this land.
It is our collective responsibility to care for each other, to care for these lands. And it is past time to turn reflection into action. We challenge ourselves and everyone here today to commit to one tangible next step to move this work forward.
Welcome back to Dare to Be Youth's Ask the Expert podcast, and welcome to the 4th episode of our new season. My name is Inshira, and I'll be the host for this episode alongside my fellow CYC member, Alex. On behalf of Dare to Be Youth, it is our pleasure to welcome John, a financial advisor at Edward Jones. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
To start, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a financial advisor.
Yeah, my name is John Krasevec. I've been 15 years with Edward Jones. I live downtown Burlington, married to my wife Carmel, and have a 10-year-old daughter, Tatum. I've son of immigrant parents. I was always taught money is a very scarce commodity growing up. So I've been basically given that scenario of protect what you have. And I've always liked the financial world. I didn't come from it. It wasn't something I went to school for, but it's something I went into later as I got older. And this has been always my passion. And I had the opportunity 16 years ago to join Edward Jones. And here I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, I think you can even relate this. Learning about finances when you're young can be really overwhelming. It seems like there's sort of a lot to get into. And learning in school, like I've never really learned much about finances, very little actually. And for young people sort of just starting out on this journey, what would be a good place to start? It seems like there's so many different resources that you can go to. What would you say?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that it's not something that's a program in the schools. I know they are changing that. Edward Jones does have something that they're starting to roll out across Canada to go to schools, but I do find that is something that's lacking in the school system to help young people really understand money. It's hard really because there's so much out there. I would say for money to learn about finances, a lot would probably start with someone that you know, someone that you trust, someone that you know already manages their own wealth. And I try to call it wealth because there's a difference between wealth and money to me. Maybe we can get into that later, but I find people, a mentor, someone that you know has created wealth, has a good stability, and start with them because they're always going to be a good resource of how to do things. A lot of times when you're reading materials, there might be an agenda behind it, and that might skew what you're trying to learn. So I would say identify someone in your network, probably someone who's a little bit older that's created some success, some wealth, and see if you can learn from them.
Yeah. And then even going off of that, there's even online, if you look in the world, there's so many different resources. And a lot of people sort of claim to be, they're professionals. They know what they're talking about. They're trying to sell you what they know. If you're looking online for advice from YouTube or sort of webinars to social media, where would you draw the line in finding a good source versus a bad source? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that are just sort of saying what they know, and it's not exactly founded in knowledge. So how would you differentiate?
Yeah, great question. And any times for me as well, and anything that I don't like being sold to. I don't want someone to come try to tell me to try to buy this or buy that, or they have the best. Because really at the end of the day, everyone has different financial needs, goals, objectives. So to take one advice from one source may not be what fits your narrative. So listening to various podcasts, whatever, in media, that's probably going to shape your understanding of things better so that you can pick pieces from each one and take what pertains to your scenario and try to learn off that.
Yeah, for sure. And then even if you're talking to someone or you're listening to those podcasts or episodes, whatever, what would be the best things to look out for, the best questions to ask as you're looking into those different things?
Who is that person giving you the advice? What qualifications they have first and foremost? Are they asking for some type of financial gain by doing this? If not, if they are, I might not have that much weight to them. If someone's really truly doing it out of the better interest of educating people, in that case, when it's at maybe at the level of your student, your student age, I would say that should be more really ad hoc for people that here's what's important for you to know, not on a business scenario. So those are going to be some of the things to consider. What firm are they with? Are they with a large reputable firm? Are they selling product or not selling product by doing this? So those are kind of some of the things that I would tend to either put a red flag to or someone that I'd listen to on each side.
Yeah, it does definitely seem everyone's sort of trying to sell you something. So look for people that are more humble in what they're doing. I like that. Yeah. And Shira, what do you have next?
Amazing. Thanks for your insight. Moving on to our next question. What do you think schools could do to help young people achieve better financial literacy, since a lot of high school students graduate not knowing how to deal with their real life financial situations?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think the number one thing would be budgeting. I find a lot of young people, because they have in some cases, and this is where a lot of the dynamics, some kids do not have access to funds, some have some access to funds, and some have an abundance of access to funds, depending on their family situation. Regardless of how much access you have to any funds, really it comes down to what are you budgeting for? What are the ins versus the outs? I've always brought the example of if I gave you a job that offered you $1 million a year, that sounds great. But if your expenses are 1.1, you will not create any wealth. On the other side, if you make 50,000 a year, but your expenses are 40, you can create wealth. So it's never about how much you make. It's how well you spend and budget what you are bringing in. And having a really good understanding of that is probably the step one that I would encourage people, if they don't have, or schools could do, is really understanding budgeting of ins and outs of dollars.
Okay, thank you. Kind of tying up with our previous question. Right now, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty in the economy right now. There's a high inflation, skyrocketing costs of living, and rising tuition costs. Many young people are anxious about their financial future. As a financial advisor, can you share insights and guidance to young people who'll be facing these issues head on in the years to come?
Number one to all this is time frame. Obviously, the longer time frame you have, the less impact short-term scenarios have on your life. So is inflation high now? Yes. Will it be high forever? No. Will interest rates be high? Are they high now? Yes. Will they be high forever? No. So all the things that you're hearing right now are a lot of short-term scenarios. I try to always educate people that no matter where you are in life, think of the long-term goals that you have and use that as a base, and don't let the short-term fluctuations of good, bad, get you too far down or too excited, and really focus on what your goal is. Look at the path further down than just the path in front of your feet. That is going to help mitigate a lot of mistakes that people make and rash decisions I find people make with money when they are so short-term focused. Keep the long-term picture in mind.
Yeah, I like that for sure. And even relating back to what you said before, and that sort of aspect of living beyond your means. That's what a lot of people seem to be doing today. They buy the $60,000 car when they make $80,000 a year, right? So sort of, I think that even needs to come back more in our education system. Is like, okay, live within.
If I can touch on something you say there, what I find a lot of times where what happens is I'll just use some easy round numbers. You make $100,000 a year, and you've lived within that budget for X number of years. You've got your mortgage planned out in that. And all of a sudden you maybe get a new job and you double your wage. And from day one, people start living that new wage where you have not even lived in that bracket for a year. And already people are starting to live that life. Again, it's that discipline factor of, okay, this is great. Let me learn how to live in this world for now. Let me accumulate, because that could all end. And if you've made now these obligations at a higher rate of living and that new income stops or changes, you can't change those obligations that easily. And now you're stuck paying that. So I always encourage people, yes, if you got a raise, it's great. Don't live in that world yet. Give yourself some time to get accustomed to that new income level.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it seems to be like a lot of the times when those higher wages come and those higher salaries comes a higher title and position. And with that sort of comes that lifestyle. And people think they need to play that lifestyle. I think that's sort of what you're talking about, like the bigger house and the nicer car and things like that. And people are really sort of scared to live within their means and sort of be humble and say, no, I'm going to stick with what I have now, even though I could have more. Sort of staying with what I have now will benefit me longer in the future, which is what you're saying, sort of look down the road and look ahead for what you can do.
Absolutely. Always think long term.
Yeah, I like that. Well, and speaking of that too, if you were to look right now, 5 or 10 years sort of down the road, with all the different things going on, like I know, like we said, interest rate, cryptocurrency, stock market, there's a lot of different things that people can do with their money. If you were to look 5 to 10 years down the road, what would you say is sort of a safe way to go in terms of investments where you can put your money in now and see a return in later? Is there even a safe way to go?
So I don't want to say safe, but I want to say something that let's use, buy things that you know. I use that in my practice now if I'm introducing people to start buying individual stocks, I ask them, what bank do you deal with? TD Bank, Scotia, Royal, whichever, buy that one. Who's your cell phone provider? Rogers, Telus, Bell, buy that one. Do you shop at Amazon? Yes, great. Amazon's good. Do you have an iPhone? Buy Apple. Buy companies or buy investments that you have a very good understanding of first. And then once you have a good portfolio, then maybe you can explore on things that you're not so familiar with. I hear a lot about, I want to buy cryptocurrency. And I ask someone, do you know what it is? And they have some idea, and then they really don't. I would never buy something that I don't understand. And I would never buy something for my clients that they don't understand or I could not explain easily. So in that, if I buy, if you look at all these companies I mentioned just off the top, these are companies everybody knows. These are companies everybody uses. These are companies that are likely going to be around for a long time. So if that's, I don't want to say safer, but I want to say more predictive, that these companies have a higher likelihood that they will be in business, they will continue paying their dividends, they will continue growing, that you will not have to worry as much as buying something that has a lot of volatility to it that you don't understand. You might get discouraged quickly and sell out. And again, using that long term, these companies are going to be around. Buy things you know.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Thanks, Shira.
Yeah, kind of connecting to that. What do you think about young people investing in GICs or like index funds?
This all comes down to risk. And I don't want to say GICs are good or bad. I don't want to say stocks are good or bad. I don't want to say mutual funds are good or bad. It really comes down to what is appropriate for you. And my little analogy that I'll use today is, I can throw out this question, is a Porsche a good car? And a lot of people might say to me, that's a great car. But what if you live on a farm and you have to haul bales of hay around? That's not an appropriate vehicle for what you're trying to achieve. So really, it should come down to what are your goals, your short-term goals, your medium-term goals, and your long-term goals, and find appropriate investments that will fit that objective. That's how you create wealth. That's how you don't get in trouble. That's how you don't panic. That's how you don't get too greedy as well. But buy things that are appropriate. So it could be a mix of a portion in GICs, a portion in, individual equities, and a portion in, ETFs, etc. But really finding that balance of what's your time frame, what's your goal, and what are you trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's unique to each individual and what their situation is. And our last question, what are the top 3 financial tips you would give to secondary or post-secondary students?
My favorite question probably that was on the list today, and I'm going to say the first one is create discipline. I've put a little mantra in it that I tell everybody that discipline creates wealth, nothing else. It's not how much money you have. It's not how much money you bring in. It's how disciplined you are with the funds that you have. So number one, create some disciplined scenarios. Number one, spend second. Don't spend first. A lot of people like to spend what they have and then save what's left over. I came from the home where save first, and if you have anything left over, spend that. So create some disciplined factors in your the way you generate income, what you're putting away. Create a habit, right? Create these habits that they're with you when you're young. Once they become habits, they're hard to get rid of, good or bad. So create discipline would be number one. 2 would be to understand don't think short term, think long term, and make decisions based on that. And the last one that we touched on earlier is invest in things that you understand or can explain easily. Once you start getting out of that realm of those 3 things, you create a lot of volatility. With volatility, people make rash decisions. With rash decisions, more often than not, they're not good decisions. So if you keep those 3 things in, I'd be certain that more often you would have better outcomes long term and not panic as much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. We really appreciate your insights today. So
Glad
that
to be here.
concludes this episode of the Dare to Be Youth Ask the Expert podcast. On behalf of Dare to Be Youth, Inshira and I would like to thank you for taking your time to sit with us today and talk about this, and offer your insights into the financial world for young people. Your expertise and your time spent in the field has been incredibly valuable as we strive to inform and empower our peers on these important issues. Thank you to everyone who tuned into this episode. If you're looking for more and you want to stay up to date and see when the next episode drops, you can follow us at Dare to Be Youth Halton and at CYC for Change on social media. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, John. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.